Rachel and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I am going to be showing you how I make breakfast bars that are super simple. My kids love them and they have a whole bunch of healthy ingredients in them. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take my coconut oil. Now if you've ever worked with coconut oil before, it's not like regular oil where you pour. In fact, it's pretty solid. So what I'm gonna do is take 2 tablespoons, put it in a Pyrex or a microwave safe dish, and heat it up. Now when you're heating it up, you wanna make sure that you are not using a high heat because you don't want it exploding all over your microwave. You'll notice when I'm cooking that I don't use measuring utensils all the time because I've been making this recipe for so long that I have a good sense of eyeballing it. Now when it comes to coconut oil, the unrefined often has a very strong coconut smell, and sometimes the refined ones have less of a coconut smell. So depending on who's going to be eating it and what your audience is, that may play a part in what you choose, which one you choose to use. So now I'm gonna put this in the microwave and I'm gonna start with 30 seconds and see how that comes out. So after 30 seconds, my coconut oil is pretty well melted. So you'll take a look and you'll see there's still one piece in there, and that's okay. I don't want it super hot because some of the other ingredients I'm going to be putting in, I don't want my egg to cook when I put it in here, so I don't want it too hot. Now, you'll notice when I do a lot of my cooking and baking, I try to minimize the number of utensils and equipment I'm using because I don't want to make such a big mess. So the next ingredient I'm going to put in is maple syrup. Now I use pure maple syrup, not the artificial one. So I love shopping at Costco, so I use my Kirkland brand, and I'm gonna pour 1/4 cup. Now, I like to do this before I do my peanut butter because once I put this in, it will leave a little residual coating, and that's okay because then the peanut butter will easily come out. Now, as I said, I do a lot of my shopping at Costco, so my Kirkland all-natural creamy peanut butter has a tendency to separate a little, so I always need to make sure that I mix it before I start scooping it out. Mix. You want to scoop down and really make sure that the oil that has separated mixes in. One of the reasons I love this brand is because the only ingredients are dry roasted organic peanuts and sea salt. So another thing with this recipe, if you are using a peanut butter that does not have salt, then you're gonna wanna put in 1/4 teaspoon of salt. But since my peanut butter does have salt, that's not something I need to put in. So now that I have it well mixed, I am going to put 1/4 cup of peanut butter into my measuring cup. Sometimes when I do this on my own, I don't use the measuring cup and I just eyeball it, but I want to show you. And I will put the full recipe in the description below. So now I've measured out 1/4 cup of peanut butter, and as you'll notice, because the maple syrup was in there first, it's gonna come out much simpler. Look, and then I can just scoop out the rest. So now that I have my peanut butter and maple syrup mixed in with my melted coconut oil, I like to really mix it. That way I make sure that even if my Pyrex dish is still a little bit warm, when I put the eggs in, they are not going to cook. So I have 2 eggs that I cracked into another little dish. Pour them in. At this point, I like to get a fork so that I can beat the eggs in. Break my yolks. Now, if you follow a plant-based diet or if you have egg allergies, you can certainly use a substitute here. Just make sure the purpose of the eggs here is binding, so you can use an egg substitute that is used for binding. You know, there's different substitutes for different purposes. Sometimes it adds moisture, sometimes it is for binding, sometimes there's various other reasons. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what the other ones are. But now it's mixed in. In my house we do eat eggs. I personally can't have dairy because of my allergy, but eggs are totally fine. So now that that's mixed in, I am going to start adding in some of my other ingredients. I have my 1/4 teaspoon. Now, I am going to do my baking soda first, and then my baking powder, because there is baking soda in baking powder, and that way I can minimize the number of utensils I'm using and not cross-contaminate should there be something that I don't want to get into my baking soda. Now again, if you do not have salt in your peanut butter, then you'll also want to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt as well. Now, I'm going to take my 1/2 teaspoon and put some cinnamon in. Half teaspoon of cinnamon. And again, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Now, even though these are wet ingredients, like I said, if you pay attention to the order that you put things in, that will minimize the need to have 2 utensils getting dirty. And also, you don't want to use a liquid and then something that is a dry ingredient, because if you do that, you will not get all of the ingredient in your recipe because a lot will get stuck to the side. All right. That cinnamon and vanilla smells delicious. My kids love having these for breakfast. And even though I make them now, we keep them in an airtight dish on the counter. And then they pop them in the microwave for about 9-10 seconds. And it's a warm, delicious, oatmeal, healthy breakfast bar. So the next thing that I am going to add in is my oats. Now again, I am going to use a 1/4 cup to do 1 cup of oats, and then I'm going to use it for a 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour. Now, why am I doing the oats first? Because the oats are certified gluten-free, and so if I am using them in another recipe where I want to be mindful of those who can't have gluten, I try to avoid cross-contamination. I have yet to find someone who is allergic to oats who can have flour. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm not so worried about using my 1/4 cup that I just used with oats in here. And these containers I love because they keep my flour airtight, and they have these stickers. So I often keep 3 types of flour in my house: whole wheat, all-purpose, and bread flour, because I do make my own sourdough. Okay. Now, the last thing I am going to add is my chocolate chips. I love using Enjoy Life chocolate chips because they are free of many of the allergens. I also like to reuse things. I buy, when possible, glass containers so that I can take the label off when I'm done, stick it in my dishwasher, and then I get to reuse them. So, because I'm opening a new bag just for you, I'm gonna pour a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips in here. And I like to use the mini ones because in this recipe, doesn't need to be. The recipe that I used to use called for 1/3 of a cup, but again, why should I take out a 1/3 cup to have another measuring cup that's going to need to be washed. So instead, I've changed it to a overflowing or heaping 1/4 and just pop that in. And as I said, I'm now going to use this container. Sometimes I like to keep the bag in there if I used to sometimes use dairy chocolate chips and I would want to know what do I need and what do my kids need. And then I realized it's fine. My countertop is clean, so I want to put these in there too. I always clean it before and after I do my cooking. So now I get to close these and I'll put them back later. Okay. So now, final thing, we are mixing. You want to make sure that you preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And before you do that, it's always a good idea to make sure that one of your racks is right in the middle of the oven. Because I've made the mistake sometimes of preheating the oven and then needing to move the rack around. Because things will cook differently, unless you have a convection oven, which I do hope to get with my next one. You want to put it in the middle because that will often have the most even temperature. All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is a trick that I learned, which might be a little noisy, but I'm going to take my Pyrex baking dish. I could spray this with nonstick spray and put these in there to cook, but I like to use parchment paper. So if you go to put the parchment paper in, what happens? It pops up and then so. Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch. Open it back up. And now, when you go to put it in, it doesn't pop up. So, you want to push it all the way down, right into the corners too. And then fold the sides up into the corners. So that way, once you put it in and even it out, you won't have the paper folding in on itself. And it looks like this. And then when I put it down, it stays. So, I am going to pour it all in. And you don't need to worry at first, once you pour it in, about it spreading evenly. Because I am going to show you one of my favorite tricks for getting your batter to be nice and even. And for me, when I discovered it, it was a game changer. So once I get all of this out, I'm gonna fill this bowl with water. And I'm also gonna grab one of my silicone spatulas. So now that I have filled my bowl with water, and I've gotten my silicone spatula, I'm gonna dip it in the water and then use it to spread it out. So I'll tilt it a little and bring it closer so you can see. By dipping it in the water, it allows me to move it without it getting all sticky. So I'm gonna put it flat down, because otherwise it's all gonna be tilted toward you, and then it's not gonna bake so evenly. But I like to do this because otherwise the corners will be really flat and the middle will be high, kind of like a mountain, and it won't cook as evenly. So you'll end up with very well done corners or edges, and the middle will be not so even. So I'm going to put this in my oven, 350 degrees, for 22 minutes, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and comment below and be sure to subscribe. Also, if you'd like to discover what else I do, click the button, discover more about me.